Welcome to the Global Hog Industry Virtual Conference. Hello everyone, I'm farm broadcaster Max Armstrong. And our session today is brought to you by Chore-Time PigTek, along with the National Hog Farmer. And please don't forget to visit our event lobby and check out the extensive collection of resources and information provided by our event sponsors. Let them know too how much you appreciate their participation in this first ever virtual conference. And if you have any questions as we go through the session, please feel free to submit them right here on the screen. I want to introduce to you Justin Lowe, who joins us in the studio here in the conference room to talk about Chore-Time PigTek. First of all, tell me about yourself and your involvement in the swine industry.
Sure. Well, great to be here, Max. I was raised in eastern Indiana on a hog farm. We had a few sows back in the 80s and 90s there. Went through a lot of different things with the way the hog industry was changing at that time. And then when I got ready to go off to college, we sold everything that we had left at that point. Went off to college for 4 years, and then came back home to help run a construction division that did hog and poultry buildings both. And so kind of got my feet back into the industry that way, and really kind of learned what went into the way we've modernized some of these things. There's been some big changes in the industry between the production practices in the 80s, 90s, and where we're at today.
So you have a lot of experience working with the producers, working to get the best facilities they possibly can.
Sure.
Chore-Time is a name that's been around for a while. What about PigTek?
Yeah, so Chore-Time has been around since the 1950s. We've always had a hog production division. And then there in the mid-2000s, they rolled the division over, gave us a little bit more autonomy to really focus in on pigs specifically, created PigTek as a specific division, and we've been operating there in our own facility in Milford, Indiana from that point forward, with a staff that's really dedicated for the hog industry, as opposed to a group of people that works with the poultry and hog side. Our team is dedicated 100% to the hog industry here.
I would imagine individuals like yourself with a rich experience of working with the producers then.
Yeah, we've got a really good team in place, sales staff that has integrator experience, production experience, and we cover North and South America as a group. So we try and have people on staff that can speak the language of different producers in the whole entire in America's region.
How varied is the product line that you folks bring?
Sure. So PigTek as a division covers the entire industry as far as the equipment sector goes, from feed delivery systems. Flex auger was invented by Chore-Time, and so we continue to sell and produce that there in Milford, Indiana. Other feeding systems like our chain and disc as well. Ventilation systems are a big part of where we've moved now. You know, when we really started with hog production, it was how can we feed these animals easier, and now it's how can we help them to grow better. And so ventilation is a big part of that, including controls, ventilation fans. And the nice thing with our ability to work specifically with hogs is that we can go out and find items that really help to push the industry forward. And that's what we've really focused on here over the last 3 or 4 years.
When they're looking at so many other things they need to devote attention to, the producer might not devote as much attention perhaps to ventilation. But how is it important? Why is it important,
Sure.
Justin?
Well, if you look back at the progression of ventilation over the course of the last 40 years, you know, originally hogs were raised mostly outside, and whatever the elements brought them is what they had to deal with. We started moving production inside, and at that point we basically just said whatever air moves through the building is hopefully sufficient. We've gotten a lot more intelligent about how we ventilate buildings moving forward. Concepts as far as putting fans in the right locations, starting to use tunnel ventilation, positive pressure ventilation systems, potentially cool cells. And so as the industry's progressed, we've tried to do some things that will really keep that temperature consistent, allow the animals to grow and produce better. Because if you think about pigs, when you walk into a facility, if they're extremely warm, they're not going to the feed, they're not going to the water, they're just laying there trying to stay cool, and so they're not growing, and effectively that's a negative for anyone that owns the pigs. On the flip side, if we allow the building to get way too cold, you've got the same problem. All of the feed that they're inputting instead of going out as additional weight, just goes to keeping their body temperature up. And so it's really critical to keep that temperature at a consistent rate. And I think that's one of the things that ventilation systems are allowing us to do.
And it's not just a matter of flipping a switch to turn on a fan. You're bringing a lot of technologies to bear here, are you not?
Yeah, so as you look at technology, and if you step outside of the industry, but you look at what we do for home systems now and for other things, we can really keep an environment extremely pinpointed. Even in your car now, you can tell it exactly what temperature you want it to be. And so we've been able to do that with technology in hog facilities. The new controls that are available allow us to try and keep the temperature in a very consistent range. We're able to take and look and say, okay, we want to be 72 degrees between the heating system and the fans that are in there. We can keep that much more consistent. We've got a study that we did with Iowa State. We've got a slide here that shows with our Pig Central ventilation system, we were able to maintain 3 degrees variance between the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And when you look at what historically has happened with older ventilation systems, 3-degree range is really, really good. Most of the time we'll see a ventilation range of 8, 9, 10 degrees because the way that we've ventilated in the past is we've turned on a fan, and when it gets to a certain temperature, we turn that fan off, and then we kick on a heater. And constantly we get kind of a yo-yo effect. We bounce back and forth all day long. And with the adaptation of new technologies, we're able to really minimize that change using RH as an influence now instead of just temperature. We can use CO2 as an influence. And so instead of having to ventilate specifically only on temperature, we can take the CO2 and say, okay, the air is still good quality air. We don't necessarily need to cool these pigs down because they're in an acceptable range, and we can keep warm, good quality air in the room and allow the room to stay at a nice uniform temperature throughout the course of the day. The other thing with technology that we've started to see a lot more of is energy efficiencies. When you look at the technology that's come about, for the last 20 years we've used fans that operate on AC power with a variable triac. And what that means is that when you try and adjust the speed of that fan slower, you basically are just dissipating that energy. You're not using it for anything. And so with DC technology, requirements that have been mandated in other countries that are continuing to get mandated here as we move forward, what we've found is that we can be way more efficient with our energy consumption, but also vary those fans to very small degrees. So a typical variable speed fan may have run at 40 or 50% on the bottom end, whereas the newer fans that are available, we can slow those all the way down to 10 to 15 to 20% and still continue to operate and pull air and keep that room much more consistent that way.
Back to your point on the graph that you shared a couple of minutes ago about the constancy of temperature there. Why does that matter, that you're not having so many spikes and troughs?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 or 3 reasons why it matters. If we look at from the producer's perspective, if the temperature is jumping up and down, what that means is that we're probably wasting propane and we're probably wasting energy on fan power. So our electric bill and our propane bill are higher than they should be because we're kicking one on and then kicking the other one back on. And so we're wasting energy in some way, shape, or form. And as an industry, we've gotten really good at trying to minimize our footprint, so to speak. But we can continue to get better with some of these technologies. From a pig's perspective, and even from a person's perspective, would you rather be at 72 degrees all day, or would you rather be bouncing back and forth and getting that hot and that cold? And what we see is you get those 8, 9, 10 degree swings. You can get a chilling effect over animals, especially when you start to look at what the humidity potentially is in the building. An 8 or 9 degree swing with some humidity shifts can actually create kind of a wind chill type effect on some animals. And so if we can keep it consistent but also keep our humidity in check, that really allows for the room to be really consistent, the pigs to perform better, and it's a general comfort thing. Animals do better when they feel comfortable, and so keeping the room consistent does a nice job at that.
There's a reminder to me to instruct my wife to leave the thermostat alone. Let's not move that thing up and down all over the place there.
Sure, yeah, it's the same thing. And The nice thing is with the newer technologies, we can set that set point. We can actually instruct on a daily basis for that set point to be reduced so that we're keeping the pigs at the optimal growth. When you bring those pigs in at a young age, you're going to want to keep them warmer because there's just not a lot of body mass. As they get older, we're going to reduce that temperature, and so with the new controls, we can program all that in. We don't have to go in there and make those daily changes. And then the nice thing with the newest technology is you can see all this remotely from your phone. You can pull out your phone and know exactly what's going on. You've got the peace of mind to know that things are being taken care of because you can't be in the building 24/7 anymore.
How important is good ventilation to the health of the animals in that structure?
Sure.
What difference does it make?
Yeah, so obviously we've touched on some of these things already, but the real critical factor, if you get those animals too cold or you get them chilled, you're going to get sick animals. That's just the nature of pigs. Even with pigs that are high health, if they start to experience stresses like that, and right now we're in a time of year where the temperature may change 30 degrees outside over the course of a day. If the pigs are dealing with those types of shifts, extremely cold temperatures overnight, and they're not staying in that nice range, we're going to chill those pigs. We're going to make them too cold, and most likely they're going to develop some sort of respiratory disease that then will slow their production. And so you'll invest additional monies into your medications.
Right.
You'll invest additional monies potentially into removal of sick or dead pigs. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is for each of these pigs to make it to market, and to make it to market as quickly as you can.
So you're contributing to the efficiency through better air quality, better management of the air. It makes a difference in terms of management of the facility as well?
Sure, yeah. One of the things that when you're managing these facilities, we really want to make sure that if you're able to keep things consistent, you're able to get the performance up. And one of the ways that we've really dialed into to do that is by using some of this newer technology, the DC fans specifically. So we've dialed in with these DC fans to where we can reduce the speed and run it at a very consistent rate. So when you look at the way a lot of buildings have been ventilated in the past, whether it's using pit ventilation or minimum fans on the wall, to get the minimum CFMs that we really want in the wintertime, a lot of times we'll have to have dead spots in a room, and the performance across that room suffers because of that. And so with these fans that can run at lower speeds, we're able to make the room much more consistent, which makes the health of the entire group better. And then the real advantage to those fans for the barn owner, not always the person that owns the pigs, they can see the benefit on the electric bill. You think about energy costs, they continue to rise. Don't see that changing anytime soon. And we look at what our energy consumption rates are. The DC fans, the newer technology fans, are 85% more efficient than the older technology. And that correlates to somewhere between $250, $300 potentially per fan on some of these facilities, which really adds up to a lot of savings just in the first year of using some of the newer fans.
Underscore that number again. I don't want folks to miss that.
Sure.
Sounds like a very important statistic.
Yeah, so I think we've got a slide here that really highlights that, but the DC fans, the ones that we offer, are 85% more efficient at those slower speeds. And then, like I said, you can bring all those fans down together, and the room itself becomes a much more consistent environment because of that. And at the end of the day, the barn owner has a reduced electric bill. And the nice thing with the technology is that we're able to do it on the small fans. A lot of the other options are maybe on bigger fans. And we've got it as part of our offering from the small fans all the way up to the largest size fans that are on the market. And so when you think about ventilating pigs, 60 to 80% of the time, depending on your area, we spend in minimum ventilation. And when you need more air, it's easy to turn on another big fan. But most of the time, we're trying to ventilate to keep these pigs healthy in that minimum ventilation mode. And so that's where it's really critical that if we can save some dollars, make the cash flow better, but also improve the performance of the pigs, it's kind of a win-win for everyone.
And while you're talking about cost, obviously it's not just energy cost. I mean, ultimately, if you're improving the herd health or giving those pigs the best chance you possibly can, you may lower other costs too.
Sure. So we've mentioned the health. Think about veterinary visits when your animals start to get sick. It's not that you don't want the vet coming on site, but biosecurity risks, obviously going from site to site. How quickly can you manage something that could be an issue because your animals got sick for one reason or another? Costs of drugs and other things that are necessary to get pigs back to health. Those things can get rather expensive. And so being able to keep those pigs healthy is really a critical factor there. And then, like I said, when we looked earlier about keeping that building in a nice tight range, we talk about energy. Propane is also a big factor in keeping some of these buildings warm,
right,
especially as we move into northern climates. They're heating those buildings for a larger chunk of the year, and so it's really important to try and reduce how often we're pulling that nice warm air out of the room by using some of the newer controls and some of the newer products.
And propane prices can be quite volatile. We can see those prices spike higher quickly sometimes.
We've seen that happen over the last 4 to 5 years, where maybe there was a $4 or $5 jump per gallon of propane because of shortages. And so if you're not prepared, or if the winter is excessively hard, you can soak up an awful lot of extra costs because of the higher cost of propane potentially.
What makes the Chore-Time, the PigTek system, different from others that are out there?
Yeah. So we've mentioned the DC fans here as we've been talking, and obviously that's a factor that no one else has, is the small DC fans. But when you tie our ventilation system together with our Pig Central control, we do things a little bit differently than anyone else on the market. Historically, we've ventilated in stages. Basically what that means is that we need heat, we turn on the heater. Next we need a fan, we turn on the first fan. Then we turn on the next fan, then we turn on the next fan. And so we take these jumps. We may jump 10,000 CFM at a time, we may jump 20,000 or 30,000 CFM at a time. And that goes back to that same yo-yo effect that I said, that when you put that much additional air into a building all at once, you're going to cool it off a lot quicker. And so especially in those early ventilation stages, we'll jump back and forth, back and forth. By utilizing our new control, we can eliminate that. Basically what we've been able to do is move away from staged ventilation, and we allow the control to be the brains. We give the power to the control, and we say, okay, there are 6 fans, here's what they're capable of, and figure out the most energy efficient and also the most CFM efficient way to operate this room. So instead of adding 30,000 CFM at a time, we may take one of those variable speed fans and ramp it up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 CFM at a time. So now we've developed a curve instead of stair steps, basically. And so when you marry the control that we have with the fans that we have that have that capability of ramping from the very end, the very bottom of the spectrum, all the way to the top, we're able to really create a nice, unique ventilation setup, which is just different from what the other companies are doing at the moment.
And the technology really makes a difference here, doesn't it?
It makes a huge difference. If you look at where controllers specifically have come in the last 15 years, 15 years ago we were still using dials on a lot of these screens to make adjustments, and now we've got touch screens like you would have on your iPhone or your Android or whatever device you may use. The technology has all moved that direction, and so now we're able to see and use those same technological advances. But then you think about where computers have gone over the last 30 years, and so with some algorithms, we can let something that can be there all the time, monitoring multiple sensors, really dive into creating the most efficient environment for the pigs.
And again, you referenced it earlier, you can track it on your smartphone.
Yeah, so you think about now the apps that they have for your home. You can see who's standing at your doorbell from remote access. And so what we've been able to do with the new control, you can see it remotely. You could actually take control of it, make changes right there from your phone. You can get alarms sent straight to you. I was
going to ask you about that, if there's something that's gone a little bit off track.
Yeah, no, so there are a lot of alarms available. You can have something as simple as a temperature alarm, which is a critical factor. something that tells you that you've got high amperage. So the ability to troubleshoot potentially a motor issue before it actually occurs. Feed time, say you've got feed in the bin. The ingredients, we try and do everything we can to feed pigs effectively, but we also try and reduce costs. Some of these ingredients don't flow out of the bins the way they used to, and so there are feed outages. And the controller can tell you as soon as something like that's happened, allow you to make a decision right there from your phone, potentially make a change as far as what you're feeding or what bin you're using. You can do that right there as you're at your kid's ball game, wherever.
In case you've joined us midstream and you're wondering, Justin Lowe is our guest here as we're visiting about the PigTek Chore-Time products on our Global Hog Industry Virtual Conference. I'm just looking here at some questions that have been coming in, Justin, I want to share with you. You all right? You ready to go?
Sounds good.
All right. Folks would like to have a little amplification here. Well, this is a great question. How much can poorly functioning ventilation systems really cost an operation?
Sure.
It can mount up, I gather.
Yeah, it can mount up very quickly. The first thing I think to think about is you've got ventilation equipment. It's a hog facility. Dust, other things can pile up on the facility itself. So the first thing, whether it's new equipment or old equipment, is just to make sure that everything is properly maintained. The cost of operating a fan with shutters that are full of dust is just astronomical. It continues to go up. And part of that cost is just your energy consumption because it makes the fan work harder. Part of the cost is the fact that you're not actually going to achieve the ventilation rates that you want to. And so when you start to put all those things together, if your curtain system is not operating correctly to keep the temperature warm, if your fans aren't operating at 100% efficiency, those costs can just greatly go up on something that you should have kind of a guaranteed cost. It's going to cost me X gallons of propane to run this heater for an hour. But if your heater sits there and runs all day because something else isn't maintained, you can really soak a lot of cost into things quick.
Here's another question. When it comes to choosing a ventilation system, is that a decision that my veterinarian should be involved in as well?
Sure. We always recommend getting a lot of people involved in making these decisions. I think it's critical when you look at the systems that are available out there. It's important for the vets to weigh in because they may know your operation better than anyone else. We would hope that they've been on site and been able to work with you. And so I think it's important that the vet can kind of weigh in on what might be best for your system. They may have some ideas that are different from other folks as well. And so when you can collaborate and put more ideas together, I think it's definitely a good thing to help make your facilities operate at a more optimal level.
Here's another question. Can you share any tips, Justin, on how best to assess when it's time to upgrade an existing ventilation system at the barn? When do you know that it's time to get a new one?
Sure. I mentioned we've had a lot of changes over the years. At one point in time, most of our buildings were naturally ventilated, and that means we didn't have any fans in them whatsoever. And we still have a fair number of facilities out there that are naturally ventilated buildings. The performance on those buildings, especially when we get into these summer months, just goes down. Pigs do not do as well when they get up into the 80, 90 degree range. And so that's the first thing to look at is, okay, are there some things we could do to an outdated system to modernize it and to make it improve? The other thing to look at really is what's the cost of operating the equipment we have? One of the things that we like to work with folks on is a return on investment. New technology does have a cost associated with it, but sometimes you can take that technology and you can make it pay for itself just by lowering your current electric bills or your current propane bills. And so that's another factor to look at is how high are our electric bills, how high are our costs on some of these things, what could we do to potentially lower them, and that's where really sitting down and figuring out what that return would be would potentially lead to a good opportunity to invest in some newer technology.
Another question, how much risk is created when differing brands of equipment and controllers are combined in a system? You know, many of us in agriculture are accustomed to throwing together different makes, even out of the field, ISO bus compatible equipment of different colors. What's the risk of doing that in the hog barn?
Yeah, so there are benefits to having your system that is all tied together from one company. We mentioned earlier the design characteristics of some of the things we're doing that's a little unique. And so by putting all of them together, we can create a more streamlined package, so to speak, where one system ties directly into the next system and they work well together as a unit. When you start to mix and match things, sometimes you'll run into pieces of equipment that don't operate the same way. I would say all of the industries, as far as equipment goes, we've all got our little twists on how we've manufactured something. And over the course of time, they're all similar, but there are definitely differences. And so having it all come from one manufacturer to where you know, okay, this is who I need to go to get things fixed or to get things troubleshot, that's really an advantage to having a system that's streamlined. Knowing where your products come from, it also makes a big difference as well. And I think at the end of the day, when you've got a partner that you feel like you can trust and you can rely on, there's some peace of mind in being able to say, okay, I know that this is a system that's going to work well for me.
How climate dependent is a ventilation system? Can the same system be used in the north as, say, in the south? That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of variability when you're talking about raising hogs in Wayne County, North Carolina, or Carroll County, Indiana, or
Sure.
even in southwest Minnesota somewhere.
Yeah, there's a wide range, and we get into a lot of different applications. I mentioned earlier that we have coverage in North and South America, and so you think about Mexico versus Canada. They're two very different climates, and so one area may specifically say, you know, we really don't need to worry about heat because we're always 80 degrees and sunny. Another area may say, okay, we're going to be heating 70% of the year, and so we really need to focus on how we can minimize some of those heating costs. And so although in the U.S. market, things are fairly similar from one region to the next, there are some big variations possible. And so that is a critical factor, is when we sit down to help design a system for someone, we really need to know where you're at, what your temperatures are, so that we can help design a system that's most efficient for you.
So there's not one size fits all kind of an answer here.
Sure, yeah, there's definitely not a one size fits all for this. It's really important to know exactly what you're going to be working with. And then our goal is to step back and to look at what all those temperature ranges, what your moisture levels are, because humidity does play a big factor in how a barn feels and how the pigs perform. And so if you've got a high humidity area and you're going to have more moisture in the building, then we need to consider some extra fan power to potentially pull that out and keep the pigs comfortable. So that's what our team is designed to do, though. We've got folks on staff that either have been in those different environments or have studied hard to make sure that we can help design a system that's most functional for the end user.
Let's go to another question here. As a hog producer, how should I go about determining what ventilation system is really the best option for my operation? Are there certain criteria that should be used in focusing on and prioritizing for a system?
Sure. I think the biggest thing there is size of your operation, ability to potentially expand as well. Those are some key things that we want to look at when you start to think about your system. Energy costs are also a really big factor for us too. And so when you look at developing a system, you can use the most energy efficient fans out there for every stage of ventilation, but it might not be the most economical. There may be some ways to use those extremely energy efficient fans for all of the initial stages, and then use some on-off fans that are extremely powerful, but don't have that same upfront cost to really maximize what your performance is going to be. And I think that's one of the things that we really try and do when we look at a system. If someone comes to us, it's not all about creating the system that's going to cost the most upfront. It's really about driving down to something that's going to be the most efficient for that end user. We've kind of got an internal saying, or kind of our mantra for developing new products. We really focus on what we call E to the third. We really want to be efficient, we want to be economical, and we want to be effective. And so any time that we develop a new product, those are really our focuses and our goals. And so I think when we look at what's going to be best for an end user, it's going to be different. We may have to really develop a product or develop a program specifically for them, but we really want to do that with the end user in mind.
E cubed.
E cubed.
E to the third, you say.
Yep.
One more question. I was wondering about this myself because I've been out on operations. Some are up on a hill and they seem to catch all of the wind coming at them. What about the wind? Can that create, the questioner says, can that create a situation for a ventilation system?
Sure. So for sure. I mentioned we've got a lot of naturally ventilated buildings now. We've put together systems that are naturally ventilated as well as tunnel ventilated, so they'll switch back and forth. And a wind coming through there can create a cooling effect on the pigs. And so if it's a building that's going to have curtains that are going to have ventilation running through them, that airspeed can definitely play an influence. And so one of the things we can do with the controllers is we can take the outside wind and help that make decisions on what we're going to do as far as operating the building. So you think about a summer storm or something blows through and the temperature drops 15 degrees in a matter of minutes. We can take that, sense what's going on, and make decisions inside the building before all of that change actually takes place. And so wind can play a huge part in our summer ventilation. It plays a really important part when we talk about minimum ventilation though. Drafts into buildings, anytime the air can infiltrate, especially cold winter air, and get on the smaller pigs, creates that chilling effect, potentially gets pigs sick. So being able to know what the outside wind is doing and potentially make some changes inside the building before it causes issues is definitely something that we're glad we can do with some of the new controls, especially.
And you put sensors to work there.
Exactly.
I think the technology.
That's one of the things that we've really started to do well over the last few years is we take the sensing technology that's available, we tie it to the control, and we tell the control what to do with that information. In the past, you might have been able to walk through a building and take an RH reading and say, okay, well, we're too humid in here, let's turn up our fans. Well, you weren't doing that all day long and all night long, and so now we can take this sensor, and the controller knows if I reach a certain humidity level, I'm going to increase my ventilation a little bit to try and cool it back off or get some of that humidity out of here. And we can do that with a lot of different factors. Outside temperature, wind, CO2, RH. There's more sensors that are coming on the market all the time to help us make that environment more user-friendly for the operator, but definitely for the pigs.
Justin, I get the feeling your products contribute to a sense of comfort for the producer. I mean, you're not having to worry so much. You're leaving it to the PigTek system.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's really a key factor as we look at where these systems are now. I won't say it's set it and forget it, because each day may be a little different, and how the pigs are performing may require you to make some minor changes. But the goal of the system is that you can set the system up, you get it operating in its most efficient way, and then you can kind of set back and let the controller do what it's going to do and operate the building, keep the pigs as comfortable as possible, and then ask it to tell you if there's any sort of an issue. You may be able to walk through and see the issue right off the bat, but the controller can tell you that whether you're there or not.
How about, in summary, sharing with us a comment here just to kind of wrap together everything that you want folks to know about PigTek Chore-Time?
Well, obviously, you know, the brand itself has been around for a number of years, and we've really put a hard focus here over the last few years at bringing products to market that are going to help drive the pig industry forward. Specifically today, we've been talking mostly about ventilation, but we've developed a lot of products over the last few years that are improving performance inside of buildings. They're improving the bottom line for the end users, and they're also really important for the hog owners to be able to have some peace of mind that even if they're not able to be in every building every single day, they can look in and kind of see what's going on, and they can know that their producers have the best equipment available on the market to help service them.
Peace of mind. That was the line that came to mind. I just didn't very eloquently say it, not nearly as much so as you did. So that's great. Thank you for sharing the product with us and all of the information and the knowledge. We appreciate it, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Justin Lowe from Chore-Time PigTek. PigTek Chore-Time. But Chore-Time is the name. It's been around for quite some time that folks readily recognize and have come to respect by all means. Great to have you here with us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Brought to you by PigTek Chore-Time and National Hog Farmer. We've enjoyed having you here in the conference room with us. Please don't forget to visit our event lobby and check out the extensive collection of resources and information provided by our event sponsors. Let them know, please, how much you appreciate their participation in this first ever virtual conference. If you have any questions in the future, well, feel free to drop back in here, review the conference if you'd like to. And yeah, it's probably even better the second time around as you pick up some of the information that Justin has shared. I'm Max Armstrong. Thanks for joining us.